This week, we read A Handyman for the Holidays by Valerie Gomez. All he wants for Christmas is to be heard. Nestled in the woods of northern Michigan, everyone looks out for one another in the tiny town of Cherry Tree, especially during the holidays. Repairman Frank Garza will fix your oven on Thanksgiving and accept nothing but a slice of pie in return. But as a non speaker, Frank has never felt he belongs. People talk at him, not with him. When Bennett Oliver and his adorable deaf daughter move to town, Frank finally meets someone who listens. Fixing their new old house has its challenges, and Bennett relies on Frank so much they're becoming fast friends. From the way Bennett looks at him, though, the buzzsaw whirring in Frank's chest tells him they could be more than friends. It terrifies him. As autumn whirls into a winter wonderland, Frank is reluctant to ruin this new friendship by testing romantic waters. But if he could melt the ice protecting his heart, perhaps he won't have to spend Christmas alone.
How are you?
Okay. You know, living mostly.
Living the Vida meh.
Why are you like this? Living La Vida, man. You're funny.
My forehead's really shiny today.
Yeah.
I'm like, this light is like really just like sheen,
Swing.
sheen. I'm like, just keep seeing the glare.
I mean, your skin looks healthy.
Maybe that's it.
We'll give it a healthy glow.
Maybe that's it. I washed it. I washed it. I moisturized. So a little
Yeah.
bit. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
We just went over this.
I didn't.
There is a content warning for this book. I forgot to put in there.
Oh,
Content
yeah.
warnings. Verbal apraxia, deaf child, social anxiety, ableism toward a non-speaker, ableism in the form of autism, internalized ableism, mild swearing, heavy kissing, mild alcohol consumption, and a child becoming temporarily lost in a crowded place. Brief mentions of cancer and medical trauma, economic hardship and medical bills, and IVF treatment and pregnancy.
So when I read that trigger warning and I saw that heavy kissing was a trigger warning, I immediately had to voice note Crystal and was like, bro nuggets, we might have to pick a different book.
But where we have had such a fucking wild time, I felt that maybe we could, come closer to the end of the year with something sweet for
Well,
once.
so I read the book first and I was
Yeah.
like,
I told her to give it
it
to give
was
it a
really
shot and see
it
what
was really
happens.
good. And it's her call if we want just a sweet just close out the year
I
or
just
if we
feel like
want
we've
to
had
replace
such
it for
misses lately that, like, you know what? Screw it. Let's just have something with a trigger warning of heavy kissing and hopefully it is sweet. And honestly, this book was so sweet. It was
I just
so,
wanted them to bang each other
I
though.
know, I know, I know.
I wanted it to be a little spicier than sweet on the Smutty Book Club.
Yeah, well, you know,
Is it so wrong that I just want
we've
a
had
man to
really
stick his dick in another man's ass?
no, but we've had such poorly written smut lately that
That's
like
true. It could have been
maybe we
ruined.
just take a break.
It could have been ruined.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but this book opens with Frank, and he is currently listening to voicemails on his phone from multiple people in town that need help with certain things. So he's a handyman, but he's basically he does everything.
So his job is not a handyman.
No, his job is not a handyman. He's a woodworker. We learn that later, but
Hmm.
yes. But
But
he does.
he's basically like the town handyman, like
Yeah.
just by default.
Yeah, he jots down the notes and he texts those who have cell phones to confirm that he's gotten their messages. They live in northern Michigan, by the way, which was said in the description, but that's okay. He is filling his travel mug full of coffee and whistling to have his dogs come back inside. He's thinking about his dad, and his dad was his idol. And unfortunately, his dad has passed
You could
away.
be my idol. Sorry. Or I could be your idol.
Oh
Whatever.
my God.
You know, something like
Yeah.
that.
But he is proud to share the same name as his dad since moving back to town halfway through his sophomore year of college 18 years ago. He followed in his dad's footsteps as a woodworker and general fixer. After getting the dogs back inside, he puts tools in the back of his truck and he heads into town. And
Riding on a
yes, like we
pony.
said, while being the local on-call handyman isn't his job, he feels like he owes the people of this town so much because they helped him out and his family when he was a kid. Plus, it makes him feel less lonely, interacting with everybody. He arrives at Evelyn's front porch. First of all, I fucking love Evelyn so much. She's a little old lady. And he's inspecting the loose floorboards, and Evelyn likes to talk like a lot. But Evelyn also knows that he can't speak and that he doesn't like to use his phone to type responses. So she just keeps up her one-sided conversation. And honestly, in my opinion, this is like the best way to learn all the tea
I was gonna say
about
she
everybody.
informs him of all the gossip in town
Not that he cares,
constantly.
but like he just it's she's so sweet. He manages to get all of his requests taken care of by mid-morning and he heads home to let his dogs out. By the way, their names are Butter and Boo, and I love them so much. And he decides to go to his workshop and starts doing a project. Then hours pass by and he realizes that he is hungry. He takes a look at his phone and sees an unknown number, which he hates seeing, but it is what it is. And it is a voicemail from a man named Bennett, who also, by the way, likes to ramble.
Hot Mess Express.
He's so funny though. I love
Mm.
him. But basically, he's working on fixing up his mom's old house, but he's having an issue with the water heater. And it seems Evelyn had given him Frank's number. So Frank texts him and asks for a picture. And I guess he should have specified because he just sends a picture of his face.
I that was just
It's actually a thing that's
so
happened. Not to me, but
wild.
I've seen that has happened before.
But just so
He's
wild.
too well, you got to understand, he is like in a frenzy because of this water heater. So I get it. And like he's really hot looking, like he's gorgeous, but like Frank's like,
Send a photo.
I need a
Hey.
picture of your water heater. And Bennett is super embarrassed. And Frank decides to take a little bit of pity on him and says, you know what? Don't worry about the picture. Just send me the address and he'll be there in like 15 minutes. When Frank arrives at Bennett's house, Bennett is so happy to see that help has arrived. And
Help is on the way, dear.
yeah, but when he sees Frank, all of his thoughts disappear because he also finds this man attractive. He apologizes for the picture again, and he's like, I am so fucking embarrassed. And he also apologizes for the house looks because they just moved in and he's been trying to fix up things little by little. And then Frank gets to work. Frank again likes to communicate by text on his phone, or he'll like write in notebooks too, but like with this he's notes apping in his phone. So he lets them know that it could have just been a bad installation and he'll work on it. Of course, Bennett is the one who tried to install it the first time, so he's also a little bit like, oh fuck. And Bennett just can't feel like Frank is kind of dismissing him. And it shouldn't bother him because Evelyn had told him that Frank doesn't speak. And that's how he communicates is through text. His daughter, we learn, her name is Libby, and she is 6, and she's deaf. But like she's pretty much fully deaf in one ear and pretty much almost deaf in the other ear. Also, Libby, hysterical. Love this child too. I loved her. But he decides he's going to stay out of Frank's way. As soon as he is done cleaning up, his daughter bursts through the door and he asks her how school was. And at the moment, he forgot that Frank was there, but they have like the door to the basement open and Libby keeps like looking at it. So he lets her know that the man in the basement's name is Frank. He can hear, but he doesn't talk.
Basement.
Yeah. His daughter is adorable and asks the funniest questions like, well, then how does he order pizza? Which is so
She's asking the real
she's
questions.
asking, and Bennett explains that he probably orders pizza with an app, and when he needs to say something, he texts or type on his phone. And it clicks in Libby's head like, oh, okay. So he just like he talks, just not with his mouth, kind of like her, which I wish that more people were that understanding of something like this. But
Mm.
children are special.
Mm-hmm.
Like asking, how does he order pizza?
Okay.
15 minutes later, the basement door opens and Frank comes out and lets him know that it's all fixed. And Frank tries to reassure him that most people wouldn't even know where to start with installing a water heater. So it's really okay. Bennett's kind of teasing him a little bit back and forth, but Bennett realizes maybe he doesn't like the teasing or realize he is teasing him. He introduces his daughter Libby to Frank, and Frank actually signs back to her to introduce himself. And Bennett has to tell himself, like, dude, he's just being kind to your daughter. Relax, because like this shit is like it's so cute. Libby asks Frank if he'll stay, but he
I
says
was
that
just
he
like, "Sweet."
it was so right. But Frank says he needs to go home and take care of his dogs. And Libby's like, oh my God, you have
Dogs,
dogs? Tell me all
dogs,
about
dogs,
them.
dogs.
He tells her their names and she asks if they know that's what they're called.
I mean, again,
Asking
the
the
real
real questions.
questions.
Yeah. And Frank's like, probably not actually. And then Libby asks if she can pet them. Frank says, yeah, sure, soon. And then Libby is, all right, cool, off and go does her own thing. Then it says he didn't know that Frank knew ASL and he feels bad for not asking. And, if Frank would prefer it, he can sign with him if it's better. But Frank says that he prefers typing because he's not really that good at signing because not many people in the town know it or
And nobody
practice it.
practices with
I
him,
know,
so
which is so sad.
he's rusty.
Yeah. And then fucking Bennett goes, well, now you know two more. And then
He
he
was like
winks.
Eeyore.
Yeah. He is. He's kind of like Eeyore.
He's literally,
He's like Eeyore and
he's
Bennett is Tigger.
Eeyore.
Bennett's very bouncy. I think Bennett has ADHD.
I don't know. I feel like Bennett might be more Pooh-like because he was like,
Maybe.
oh, you know what I
He's like
mean?
kind of a combo.
And then he's got a little piglet next to him. Like, you know what I
It's
mean?
so cute.
I
This
just
whole
so, but
yeah,
definitely this was an
there's
Eeyore situation.
there was yeah, this whole thing. It was so cute. And then Bennett chastises himself, saying, "Oh fuck, I was trying to like flirt with him, but like maybe he didn't like that." But Frank just kind of smiles a bit, and then he leaves. Bennett asks how to pay him, but Frank says he doesn't do this for the money. Bennett is insistent that he gives him something, so he asks him for beer or coffee, his treat, sometime, and they exchange phone numbers. And Bennett kind of hints that he wants to be friends. And this is new to Frank because it's been a very long time since he's had a real friend. It's so sad. Most people that he talks to just get frustrated with how slow he types and they don't wait to hear as he speaks. And he's just really nervous that Bennett's going to end up turning out just like every other person in the town, talking his ear off without really wanting his own thoughts because in town he is the unofficial nice guy. So he's just kind of worried, but he is
Right.
hopeful.
Like I loved his little segue where he's like, he could be the worst person in town. He could have all these thoughts about murdering people. No one would know. He could be the villain. He could walk up to people and think, I hope you rot in hell. And they would never know. And it was just his little,
Yeah.
I could be. No, that was, no, we're not going to be hero. No, but like, he's like, I could be the villain.
He gets a text message from Bennett thanking him again for the day and that he'll text him soon about coffee or whatever. Several days go by and he doesn't get a message from Bennett, and it kind of really just gets into his head. And days keep going by without hearing anything. And then after a shower, he finally gets a phone call and answers it instead of letting it go to voicemail. And it is Bennett. So it is the day before Thanksgiving. Apparently, his stove has decided to not work. And he's used it every single day since they moved in, but now it's not working. So Frank tells him he'll be there in 20 minutes. When Bennett opens the door, his hair is just
I
disheveled.
highly doubt that he used it every single day.
Yeah, I do too.
Maybe
And
for frozen pizza.
well, it's only been a few days. He hasn't been here for very long, so
That's true.
Yeah. He explains that he was going to warm up a frozen lasagna because he's getting ready for Thanksgiving, but it didn't work. Bennett also apologizes for not calling about the drinks yet. Ever since they moved, he's been doing a research project for another professor. This is where we learn Bennett is a teacher. Frank starts to get to work on the stove, and Bennett lets him know that he will tell Libby that he is there because she will be so happy to see him. Apparently, ever since she met him, she's been asking when she's going to see him again. And
And the
originally,
dogs.
yeah, and originally Bennett thought it was just because he knows ASL, but he thinks that she just likes him. And this makes Frank smile. Libby does come in and starts asking him what he's doing, and he explains that he's trying to fix the stove so that they can have dinner, but it's not looking very good. Apparently, mice have chewed through the wires, and he's actually surprised that the fucking stove worked at all or didn't even cause a fire, so it's definitely not getting fixed that night. Bennett talks to Libby, and they decide on pizza, and Libby wants Frank to stay for pizza. And while Frank normally would find a way to decline the offer, he doesn't want to disappoint her. So he agrees. And they're going to meet at Reggie's Pizza. So originally, Bennett had suggested a different pizza place, but it's too loud for Frank. So he suggested Reggie's. And when they walk in, Bennett's like, you know what? This was a better decision because Reggie's Pizza is just so nice and cozy. Their waitress greets them, and the way she speaks to Frank makes Bennett think the waitress is very interested in Frank. But Frank has no interest in her at all. Frank explains that she was probably just being that way because of the table, so the table they're sitting at, Frank actually made. And Bennett is amazed because it's beautiful. Frank has a very hard time accepting compliments, which I understand. So hard. Bennett asks him what he does when he's not being the town's superhero. Frank tells him he's a woodworker. And
Not a superhero.
Bennett's like, oh my God, please tell me more. And Bennett can kind of sense through this conversation that he's kind of a little uncomfortable. And he goes, is this miserable for you? Frank says, no, it's not miserable for me, but it has to be for you because I type very slowly. Bennett reassures him and says, like, listen, like, dude, I'm in no hurry. I'm asking questions because I want to know more about you. Frank's insecurities come out and asks if he would prefer to do the talking. And Bennett thinks that he's making fun of him because he talks a lot, which was really funny. But he says, no, like, talk to me. It's fine. So Frank tells him about his dad, about him going to college, and basically the entire story of him coming into town.
Riding on a pony.
When they're all done, Libby asks if they're done with their grown-up talk. And then they play a game of Connect Four. And through everything, Bennett is just trying to think of like why he didn't come back to Cherry Tree sooner. Like he was so unhappy in New York. He was stressed out trying to raise a child alone because seeing Frank and Libby playing together and signing together is just so heartwarming. As they're getting ready to leave, Bennett realizes tomorrow's Thanksgiving and he can't cook anything. And honestly, without thinking, Frank just invites him over to cook dinner at his house because all he was really going to do anyways was eat leftovers and watch bad movies. And Bennett is like, that's what you were going to do? What the fuck? If I had known, I would have just invited you to my house. Like, Frank says, it's okay. He's just always alone, which is so sad. It's just more and more Eeyore every time. It's so sad. And but that is not what Bennett wants to hear. So Bennett will go over to his house, cook Thanksgiving, but he's like, I don't want to be casting you out. I have never been able to make decent mashed potatoes. They always come out really gross. So that is going to be Frank's job is the potatoes. Does he know if Frank can make potatoes or not? Probably not. But
No,
you know what? Frank is good at
doesn't.
everything. He lets him know.
I think he just assumes that Frank can literally do everything.
Mm-hmm. So they're going to make Thanksgiving dinner at Frank's. Frank lets him know that in the morning he has to work on a vacation house that will take about an hour or two and they can come over at any time and they head out. Frank texts Bennett later on, letting him know that he had a really good time at dinner. Bennett tries to flirt a little bit, but was also trying to like be a friend. He's like trying to skirt the line of flirting, but not flirting. And let him know that it was really good to be out with him too, and he really liked getting to know him. Frank lets him know that he might want to bring some toys or things for Libby to do because he does not have things for children at his house. And Frank stares at his phone because there's so much more he wants to say to Bennett because it wasn't just a good night, it was one of the best nights he's ever had. But he realizes he needs to clean up his house. because, people are coming over. He does all of that, and at 2:30 in the morning, he falls asleep. He wakes up the next morning at 8 a.m., which is the longest he's slept in, and the dogs are waking him up because they need to go out. He's not sure when Bennett and Libby will be over, but he did hear that sometimes people roast turkeys like really early in the day. And a few days ago, he had gotten a call from Jules Walker, someone he's known since Jules was a toddler. And he had said he was going to bring some friends to his parents' lake house. Frank usually preps it every single time. And he really likes Jules a lot. And especially like all the years that he's known him, he's always been really, really, really kind. And while the man is way more than 10 years younger than him, he thinks that if Jules had lived any closer, they could actually be friends. So he heads up, goes to prep the house, gets everything ready, and then as he's heading back home, he stops at the coffee shop. He orders himself a coffee and thinks back to conversations he's had with Bennett and realizes like on Bennett's first day, Bennett is a regular at this coffee shop. So he asked the barista for Bennett's regular coffee, which was so cute. And then he also gets a bunch of pastries to bring back to the house. And he feels a little silly buying so much, but the thought of Libby and Bennett in his house just fills him with so much joy, which is so cute. When he pulls up to the house, Bennett is there and he sees Libby sitting cross-legged, petting Butter, and it's just adorable. And then Libby sees him and she gets so excited. He gives the coffee to Bennett and they kind of joke around a little bit. And Frank laughs out loud, like a very small one. And Bennett's eyes go fucking wide. And Frank realizes that there was a noise that came out. And Bennett says, I thought your voice didn't work, but it's there, isn't it? And he's just very kind about it. He's not doing it in like a like a
Weird.
jokey manner.
Right.
Like he's like genuinely like happy about it. And Frank realizes he hasn't talked about his disability because it's not something he's ready to talk about with Bennett yet. But Bennett says, yeah, let's go. And they just talk about Frank's house because Frank basically restarted building this house from the ground up. And they just have this conversation, but Bennett has to get the turkey ready. So Frank goes to take a shower. And when he gets out of the shower, he's just hit with the smell of Thanksgiving. And he's suddenly just so overwhelmed with memories because the last time he had been part of like a home cooked Thanksgiving dinner, his dad had tried to deep fry a turkey and tried to it almost burnt down the house. Bennett doesn't notice him coming down the hall and he just stands and observes. But guess what? Bennett does actually know because he goes, I can feel you watching me. I can feel your eyes on me. It's really, you can though. When someone's like staring at you, you can kind of feel people. Yeah. And tells them to do the potatoes while he checks on the turkey. And then he asks Bennett to tell him about his job. And Bennett explains about his teaching job, and every now and then he goes to check on Libby. Then says that his ex couldn't understand why he wanted to move to the middle of Michigan and teach at a community college when he could be teaching at a major university. And that his ex, he was always looking for an opportunity to make money. And Frank catches the he part of this conversation and asks him if he's gay. And Bennett's like, yeah, you didn't know? Like, I'm surprised Evelyn didn't tell anybody because
she probably did, but Frank probably just tuned her out.
Probably because he does that a lot. Yeah. Frank says that she's just lonely and likes to make conversation because like the way that it comes out, I think Frank kind of thinks that maybe Bennett's shitting on Evelyn and he feels really protective over this woman. And but yeah, so Bennett asks if Frank's okay with him being gay, and Frank's like, yeah, of course. Libby tugs on Bennett's sleeve, asking when the food's going to be ready, and he says not for a while. And Frank suggests they go for a walk, which, okay. And Bennett's like, okay, yeah, Libby's kind of like a city girl, but we'll do that.
Yeah, Libby's a city girl.
Yeah, Libby's the city girl.
Yeah, just Libby.
Just Libby, yeah.
It's
before they fully go for a walk, he gives Libby an emergency whistle that she can use in case of an emergency for if she ever gets lost or something scary happens, she can blow on it and they can find her. And this is such a really big moment, but Frank also kind of wonders if Bennett might think he's overstepping, but when he looks at Bennett, all he can see in his eyes is warmth and gratitude. Frank understands that someone with a disability might need another way to communicate in an emergency, and he feels really protective over Libby. Bennett, by the way, not an outdoors person.
Yeah, because it was just Libby who's
Libby, by the way,
frolicking
she is
in
having a
the yeah.
fucking blast. She is like having so much fun out there.
But we should really just bring Libby inside because she's,
Hmm.
a city girl.
Yeah. After a while, Frank lets Bennett know that he doesn't actually really like leaving the oven on when he's not home. And he can hang out with Libby if he wants to head back to the house. Frank's like, it's literally perfectly fine. Like, I don't mind. They'll stay super close to the house, but Libby has her whistle if anything happens. And Bennett thanks him for that because it was really smart and super thoughtful. And Frank says, I know what it's like to feel vulnerable. And this is when we learn he hasn't told this, but this is Frank's inner monologue, by the way. But Frank in his inner monologue talks about how he had gotten a whistle at 6 years old. He had to have brain surgery because he had a brain tumor. And when they took the tumor out, it hit the certain muscles in there that control like your speech and everything. So he got verbal apraxia. And he struggled for months through speech therapy, but was told pretty much that he would likely never regain his ability to speak, which is sad. And his pappy gave him the whistle. When Bennett heads back to the house, he's really grateful that Frank gave him an excuse to go back because he was cold. And he can still keep an eye on Frank and Libby from a distance. And all he can think about is how Frank is so kind and thoughtful. And he wondered about his disability, what it must be like to not be able to speak, and if he's had this his whole life. And then his thoughts wander to Frank's dating life, and he hasn't known him very long. But he hasn't mentioned a partner, and he didn't really seem interested in the waitress. And sometimes the way he looks at him, but Bennett needs to stop that thought process because it's literally none of his business. But still, Frank's a catch and he's handsome and his hands, this man really likes his hands. The sight of Frank and Libby heading back to the house pulls him out of his thoughts and his heart just melts at seeing them. Frank apologizes multiple times for the state of Libby's clothes, but Bennett reassures him that as a parent, he learned a long time ago to carry at least two spares sets of clothes for Libby, and he grabs his backpack and gets her all changed. They clear the dining table and they play a modified game of Uno. And after a few rounds, Frank removes a homemade cherry pie from the freezer and puts it into the oven. And Bennett tries to think, what can't this man do?
But we also watch Bennett be this like super dad too. So I think he needs to be kind to
I'm
himself.
I'm so glad that we get to see that part of Bennett too. Like
Mm,
things were hit in the book that you don't normally get in some books where we're like,
yeah.
please do this.
It was so nice to see.
A dad, considering the
Well,
last one of the last books, not one of the last books
right,
we read, but another book we read where the dude hadn't seen his children for a year and it was like
right.
pissy.
And not only that, but like I was just having this conversation at work, but it's very obvious when you're around so many children and parents all the time.
Hmm.
Not necessarily, you can make those assumptions, but you shouldn't. But it's very obvious when families are like genuinely like happy to be parents
Yeah.
and like it is a joy for them to be parents. And
Yes.
that's what it felt like for Bennett. And it was nice to see.
Yeah, it is really nice to see. And especially in a book too, because like
It was a little palpable, right? Yeah.
because sometimes they'll like put a parent in there, but it's very clear that they've never understood what a parent is in their entire
Right.
life.
Or like, oh, I've never met children.
Exactly.
Right.
I don't know what a child is.
But
We've
I'm going to
had
put them in my book.
we've had literally many of those
Yes.
too. Like it's crazy.
So it was nice.
No, absolutely. It was beautiful. So, Libby is basically falling asleep and Bennett says that he should probably wake her up and take her home.
Wake me
And
up
Frank
before you
offers
go.
them to stay because it's sleeting outside and the road can get really icy. And Frank would really like them to stay. So Libby's going to stay in the spare room. And later, I'm just going to cut to the point now is that Frank basically insists that Bennett sleeps in his room and Frank will take the couch. They have that argument way later on, but like that is the sleeping arrangements. Bennett thanks him for such a perfect day, and Frank's quiet for a long time, but Bennett can see him staring at him, and it kind of looks like longing. But before he can pinpoint the exact look Frank is having, Frank snaps his eyes away and goes to check on the fire. Frank wants him, and judging by Bennett's little smirks, Frank knows that Bennett knows, but asks him if he is okay. And Bennett asks kind of like what's going on. And Frank explains that he's just not used to having guests. He doesn't know how to act like a normal human being. But Bennett reassures him and says, like, why don't we just talk? And they do. Frank talks about his woodworking, some of the odd jobs that he's done, and Bennett pays attention. He never talks while Frank is like composing a text message. He never like interrupt like Bennett is being a good person and like not interrupting while Frank is trying to explain things. And Frank hasn't told anyone as much about himself as he is telling Bennett. Bennett then eventually opens his mouth to speak and says he doesn't know if he should ask this and he doesn't have to answer if it's too sensitive of a topic, and asks where Frank's family is. And Frank is a little taken aback and tells him, it's fine. That was not the question I was expecting. And he explains about his family, how his dad had retired. And then once Frank could run things at the house and everything by himself, his mom and dad moved to Texas. His dad died a couple years after they moved, and his mom stayed with her family, and all his relatives live in Texas, but he doesn't have anybody here. But he does text with his mom. She's very happy there. And Bennett asks if he's close with the rest of his family, and Frank just says, not really. They just don't know what to say to him. And Michigan is his home, and he can't imagine living anywhere else. Bennett tells him that's beautiful. And to be honest, that's why he moved there with Libby. He wants her to have a sense of home. And then Bennett asks what movies Frank would have been watching if he hadn't come over. And he's like, all the Legally Blonde movies, anything with Sandra Bullock, The Great British Bake Off, or a Hallmark movie. And Frank's like, please do not judge. And Bennett's like, no, like that's really sweet. I like all those movies too. And the next time you're watching any of those movies, call me and I'll come over and watch with you. And then Frank asks Bennett to talk about himself. So Bennett explains that he was married for 4 years to a man named Chase, and there were a lot of red flags. As Bennett's explaining this, I was like, red flag, red flag, red flag. What the fuck? Bennett, stop. But, and, they just kept getting more and more. When they also discussed having Libby, and they got a surrogate. And by the time that Libby was born, everything was just falling apart. And Chase was becoming less and less interested in Libby and fell back into his old life and pulled away. So when Bennett's mom told him that she was going to sell the house since it had been mostly empty for the last 2 years, he felt that it was a good time to move. And so they did. Frank apologizes and says that he's sorry that things didn't work out with Chase. And Bennett says, listen, I just didn't belong there. I'm pretty sure this is where I'm supposed to be. Frank tells him that he's glad he's there. And Bennett says, me too. And then Bennett lifts his hand and holds it out in the space between them with his palm up. And Frank doesn't know if it's an invitation for a handshake or like what the fuck is going on. So he just puts his palm into Bennett's and they just kind of like hold hands and it's so cute. And Frank, for the first time in a long time, hates not being able to speak out loud because it's like silent in this moment. And he would, break the silence with like a joke or something. But he also wonders so much about Bennett and what it would be like to kiss him. And they stay like this for several moments, and he nearly falls asleep when Bennett finally speaks and says, listen, when I said I was going to ask you some questions, what did you think I was going to ask you? And Frank says, yeah, I thought you were going to ask me if I was gay or why I can't speak. I was expecting one of those two questions. Apparently, no one, though, has ever asked him the first question, but And Bennett asks if he would like him to ask either of those. And Frank says, I'm not sure. So Bennett tells him, how about you tell me when you're ready? And then Frank lets him know that he is gay. And he's never told anybody before, and he's not worried people would react badly. Most of them just would accept it. He just doesn't talk anything personal with anybody, and no one's ever asked. He hasn't found anyone who he felt like he could talk to. And Bennett squeezes his hand and thanks him for telling him, and he's happy to be that person for him. And it did. They were almost going to kiss. And then the fucking dog chose that moment to wake up from a deep sleep and gets distracted by raccoons, who the raccoons like taunt this dog, which is so funny.
And Crystal had her raccoon appearance.
I did, yeah. I hadn't had it yet. And we had the man named Raccoon last year, which was still a
Crystal
wild
needs
book.
a raccoon a year.
Honestly, that's still a wild book though. Like I'll never get over it. Frank tells Bennett that he should probably go to bed and they part ways. Bennett wakes up in the morning to Boo licking his hand, and it takes him a little bit to figure out where the fuck he is. And he realizes, oh shit, just kidding, I'm at Frank's house. And he heads down the hallway to check on Libby. It turns out, though, Libby and Frank are in the kitchen making knock knock jokes. This knock knock joke was funny, though. Like, it shouldn't be as funny as it was when I was giggling at that. And yeah. And Bennett tells Frank he should have just woken him up because he knows that Libby is an early riser. And Frank just says, listen, you're a single parent. I thought you could use some extra sleep. And he's making breakfast for them. He's making pancakes. Frank has to leave though because he's going to pick up some stuff. He's got to go help people in the morning. And he tells them to stay as long as they like and to just leave the dishes and close the door before they go. Bennett asks if they're okay. And Frank says, yeah. Bennett says, listen, I had a really great day yesterday. It was really special to me. I liked getting to know you, and I promise to keep everything that you said between us. Frank texts him later, thanking him for including them in their holiday, which was cute. For the next 2 weeks, Bennett does not see much of Frank. They talk a little bit, but December's just really, really busy. But it also doesn't seem like Frank's kind of avoiding him because Bennett tries to invite him to do things, and he's always finding an excuse to not do the things. He does eventually run into him at the cafe and asks if he's in a hurry. And Frank says he kind of is. Bennett tells him that there's a holiday festival, and he thought that maybe he could come Saturday with Libby and him. Frank tells him that he's already going, and he apologizes because this year is just rough for him. And then we come to the festival, which is basically just like a fair. And
same, yeah.
Yeah, and Libby and Bennett are having such a great time. And honestly, I love going to fairs. Like they're so fun for me. The food and the vibes, minus the people. Yeah. But Bennett keeps trying to look around for Frank. They don't see him, and he's a little disappointed, but
that's why I just make the food at home.
That is true. I don't know. I love fair food. It's so good.
That's why I just make it at home.
Yeah, but it's less healthy at the fair.
Exactly. But it
I
tastes
prefer
just as
it that
good
way.
at home, and I don't have to have people.
That's you. But it's finally just getting really late, and Libby asks if they can go home, and it's kind of close to her bedtime. Bennett's been texting Frank throughout the day, but he realizes like he can't keep Libby up, so they need to go home. He checks his phone one last time. And by the time he is ready to go again, he is surrounded by a large group of people, and Libby is missing. Ooh, Frank is exhausted. His phone has been going off all day, and the only thing he wants to do is find Bennett and Libby. He wants to take them to get fresh donuts and then leave. It's after 8 when he finally can take a break, and he is getting a phone call from Bennett, and Bennett is freaking out because he cannot find Libby. So Frank asks him where they are, and he is going to go help find Libby. And he's headed over there, and when he's jogging past the information tent, he hears a loud whistle, and it's Libby. And behind her are 2 security guards, and he was just about to open up his phone to text Bennett, and Libby starts racing towards him. The guard asks if this is his daughter, and he says no, and they're like...
She doesn't just race towards him. She runs and jumps into his arms. No, 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 no. Do not take away this Hallmark moment.
Sorry, sorry. It
He
is very
runs to him
Hallmarky.
and starts sobbing and hugs him and just
Stupid guards are like,
Frank probably
listen,
hasn't hugged another human in like
I know,
20 years,
let
and
alone
this
a
little girl
child.
launches herself into his
Mm,
arms. Don't take this away from me.
sorry. I'm sorry. But the guards are like, they don't want the girl to go with him, like, if it's not her parent, which
Right.
understandable, but they're also just like kind of
But
rude.
clearly, this little girl just ran to him and
Right,
launched herself.
exactly. He explains
Right.
that his name is
Like,
Frank. Yeah.
what if she didn't come to the fair with a parent?
Right? Like, yo. Yeah, he explains who he is and that his name is Frank. He can't speak, but he communicates with ASL. And I don't think that these guards know how to deal with people who can't hear because they're trying to ask Libby her name and they're like yelling, like, what is your And I'm like, yo. So Frank actually ends up stepping in. Like, he explains that she is deaf and they're kind of fucking speaking loud, so Frank just translates ASL to her and he translates to them, like he acts as like an interpreter. That's the word I was looking for, couldn't find it. They do get in touch with
You got
Bennett
there
and he
eventually.
comes to get her. He thanks Frank so much for helping find her. Frank says, I didn't find her. I just talked to the security guards. And Bennett's like, can you just like stop being so unwilling to accept a thank you? Like, I would have found her eventually, but she was scared and lost. And the whole reason she was able to get your attention was because of the whistle you gave her. Like, I need to get Libby home, but would you want to come over? And Frank agrees. He just has to go get some things before he heads over. Frank decides to just take a quick shower since he's been running around all day, and he heads his way over to Bennett's house. When he gets there, before he can even knock on the door is swinging open. Bennett is still wearing the clothes he had at the festival, but the look in Bennett's eyes, he is hungry. And without a word, Bennett clutches his sweater, pulls him in, and pushes him up against the door. And then Bennett asks if he can kiss him. But before he can get the question like fully out, Frank leans in and kisses him. And Frank's kisses are a little cautious and they start to make out a little bit. And then Bennett starts to kiss down his neck, and then Frank flips them around and cages him in. And then Bennett slides his thigh between his legs. And I'm sure this is where Ariel's like, yes, please keep going. They don't keep going, for the record. Frank
Nice.
kind of like rolls his hips into the thigh, but then he steps back. And Bennett's a little confused and he apologizes and says, look, I'm so sorry if I misread this. And Frank's like, no, but he thinks that they should stop. Bennett asks if he did anything wrong, and Frank says, no, it wasn't anything, but I think we should just be friends. Like, I like you a lot. And Bennett is getting frustrated, honestly, understandably so. He does say, like, he's so sorry, but he's worried about, like, hurting his feelings. Frank needs to, like, explain this to him. And Frank says, listen, like, I like you, like, I really like you, and being around you made me realize I've never had a real friend until now. You're literally the first. And if things don't work out, I don't want to lose you as a friend. That's not what he wants, but like that's what he needs.
But
And
he's
Bennett
not.
understands.
Yeah.
He's a little frustrated, but he can understand it. And Frank leaves. Bennett is going to be respectful of Frank's decision to be friends. He thinks about, you know, when he sends text messages, he kind of like second guesses some of the text messages because he doesn't want it to come across as wanting more. Like he's trying to really and truly be a good friend to Frank. Libby's school is about to close down for 2 weeks because of the holidays. After the holiday show, which is this school wide program that includes singing and dancing. And Libby asks if Frank is going to go to the holiday show. And Bennett says, probably not because I didn't ask him. He's been very busy. And Libby asks if that's why he hasn't been over. But then Libby asks him to ask Frank to come, like,
Yeah.
please.
Do it.
So
Do it
Bennett
up.
calls him and leaves a voicemail inviting him to the holiday show. Just know it's another rambling voicemail from
Of course
Bennett.
it is.
Yeah. Bennett pulls into his driveway and he sees Evelyn on her porch and offers to help her bring in a box, which is a very, very heavy box of books. And Evelyn is so cute and says she was just about to call Frankie, the poor dear. She calls him Frankie. And she drops the bomb of everything that we know, which is he had a brain tumor when he was a child and the doctor removed it. And now Bennett is understanding how his disability came to be. So he's thinking, like, that must have been really fucking hard for him and his family. And basically, the entire town came together to help out the family. And like they had like fundraisers and posters so Bennett can kind of remember like because he was a kid when all this was happening, like kind of like little
Before he moved
flyers.
away.
Yeah, before he moved away. Like of little fly and it was just like the whole town. It was so cute. And then after Frank recovered, he used to run around the town with the silver whistle, like making the noise really loud, but he was happy. So like no one like thought to like be stopped. And you know, Evelyn's like, you know, he's such a nice young man. He's also a really handsome man, don't you think? And she's
Yes,
trying
Evelyn.
to hint that, like, you should go for it. And before he leaves, he asks if there's anything else he can do for Evelyn. And she says, no, but thank you for moving that box. Also, if anybody hurts Frankie, there are plenty of people in this town to answer to. So basically hinting, like, please date him, but if you fuck up, we're coming for you. And I love it so much. And then we have the holiday show, and Libby is dressed in a sparkly red tights, and she is signing the words. And sometimes she sings a little bit, even if she's off with the sound. It's so cute. And it's just like she's having a blast. Bennett doesn't see Frank there, so he's kind of like not surprised that but he is a little disappointed. When everything's over, he goes to find Libby and offers to go get ice cream with her, and Libby asks if Frank can go. But Bennett says, like, Frank didn't come. But Libby says, no, he was over there in the corner. And sure enough, Frank was there. He had come in, he was on call, so he didn't even get a chance to clean up. He just literally hopped into his truck as soon as he got the message and went over. Libby invites Frank for ice cream, but he apologizes and says that he can't, but maybe next time. It was a little disappointing, but it is what it is. They go through the lobby and several teachers stop them, complimenting Libby, and then at some point they get separated from Frank and Frank disappears. When they get outside, Frank had not actually left, but they walked to the car and they're doing that like where you hold each like the hand of the child and you like swing her up and it was so cute. Bruh. Frank curses himself the entire drive home. Like, why is this perfect man and his perfect daughter so fucking perfect? And he's even like, there's no way to even avoid Bennett because this town is so small. And Bennett truly is the only person who bothered to get to know him at all. And Bennett asks questions, but what does he have to offer this man? And he just completely fucking spirals. He's just getting in his own head about everything. He really needs to get back to the workshop and finish on a table he's been working on, but everything is just so fucking tiring. Wednesday morning, he wakes up to a few inches of snow and a few requests for last minute holiday help. And after lunchtime, he is going to go check on the Walker vacation home because he got a motion detector alert that like something was up there and something got tripped. He's like, it's probably just a deer, but we want to go check it just in case. When he gets there, he notices that there's a car. Apparently, Jules just decided last minute to go up there. And Frank's like, if I had known, like, I would have gotten all your stuff together because he always gets everything put together for when Jules is coming to visit. And Jules is like, no, 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 you're good. Like, don't worry about anything. It's literally okay. So Jules is there with two other friends. It's very cute. And Frank asks Jules if he can talk to him about something personal. And Jules, yeah, okay. He goes, am I good looking? And Jules is like, what? Yes, of course. Like I have told you a half a dozen times that if I was 10 years older and single, I would be so into you. Which is so cute. And Frank opens up about Bennett and his self-doubts as to if he thinks he's even good enough for him. And Jules is such a good friend and tells him, listen, you are amazing. You are good enough. You're so kind. You do so much for the community. You build furniture. You bring treats. You do so much. You are better than good enough. I think that you're just using the I'm not good enough as an excuse. And I personally love that Jules called him out for this. And it gets to the point where they're continuing to talk and Jules says, "You're in love with him. Like, you need
He's
to
in
talk to
love
him."
with a stripper.
No.
I wish wish that he was a
Oh my
stripper.
God.
'Cause then maybe we'd get some. No, sorry.
I don't think, no, no.
I just wanted them to cuddle in bed together.
I, yeah, that would have been really nice, but that was not happening. Jules tells him, like, you need to tell him and tell him that this just friends arrangement is garbage. Frank is open to it, but he just needs to think about what to say. He eats dinner with Jules and his two other friends, and he promises that he will give Jules a full report when he does finally talk to Bennett and thanks him and says, look, I'm so sorry. It took me so long to realize that you were my friend, which is so cute. And Jules says, you know, you have more people around you that could be your friend. And he promises that he's gonna try to be more open. Like, I can only imagine how isolating like his disability is in this tiny ass town. And even though like all of the people in the town really do their best to help him, it is one of those things where they don't try to
Right.
be open about it.
Well, and
So
he's not open enough back and communicative of this is what I need.
true. It's like I can't think of the word. Anyways, it's whatever. It's sad. But anyways, so he goes home and he was tossing and turning, trying to go back to sleep. And he just kept thinking about the conversation that he had with Jules. And he's kind of excited, but also dreading this conversation that he needs to have with Bennett. And he just decides to that the sun isn't going to come up for another hour. And
The
honestly,
sun will
this
come
whole
up.
town sounds like so beautiful, minus the cold part. But he lets his dogs out, and then when he goes back inside, he takes a shower. And his phone has been quiet because no one has contacted him to do anything. So he thinks that maybe this is a really good day to talk to Bennett. And he brushes his teeth, puts his boots on, and he grabs the gift that he's been making for Libby, which is so cute. And he's gonna head over, and he realizes as he's driving through this town, it's fucking Christmas. And how the fuck did he not realize it?
Got
But then
distracted.
he's been so busy that it makes sense. And now he's thinking, fuck, maybe I should just go back home, let the two of them enjoy their holiday. And his phone starts going off, and it's fucking Bennett. And Bennett's like, yo, so Merry Christmas. So like I have an emergency. Um And he's like, yeah, so my heat stopped working, the furnace made a terrible noise, and then the lights started flickering, and the toilet's overflowing, and there's water everywhere. And I think there's a raccoon family in the attic, and the roof is leaking, and the rain is coming in. And he's like, it's not fucking raining. He goes, and
He
I
looks,
miss
he's literally like basically in his driveway and he looks up and there's no rain. It's like the rain's coming in.
and he goes, and I miss you. And could you come over? And he starts knocking on the door, and Bennett is on the phone. He goes, hold on, someone's knocking on the door. And he answered it,
He
and
just shakes
it's
his head and gets out of the car and goes to the door at this point. It's just like, ugh.
and Frank is there. And he he's like shocked. He goes, how the fuck did you get here so fast? He goes, well, I was already on my way over because I don't want to be friends with you. First of all, my heart would like drop to my asshole if someone said that to me.
I don't want to be
And
your
he goes,
friend.
he's like, I want more if you do. And Bennett says that he does. And it's so cute. And they kiss, and all of a sudden you just hear Frankie Garza, and it's fucking Bennett's mom is visiting. And they all thought it was Evelyn coming over with the fruitcake, which is so bad. And they're like, have you had it? And Frank's like, I'm allergic, which his mom's like, "You're not missing out." And Bennett's like, "Can you like give us a minute? Like we were in the middle of talking." And but his mom's not done. And she goes, she's so funny. She goes, at least come inside and get out of the cold. Poor Frankie's gonna freeze. And Bennett's like, what about me? And she goes, you'll be fine. And she says she's gonna go play with Libby. And then she even mentions, like, Libby likes you. Merry Christmas. And Libby is so cute. And she goes, I knew you would come today. Daddy thought you wouldn't, but I knew you would. And Frank gives her the gift, and they're these little wood carvings of fucking Boo and Butter, the dogs.
Doggos.
And it's so cute. And yeah, so Bennett asks what made him change his mind, and he says that he talked to a friend, and Bennett's like, "Oh, so you
You have
do
friends?
have more friends." And he says, "I'm trying." But yes, they Bennett asks him if he can stay for the day, and Bennett's kind of like, "Well, what about your family?" And he says, "But I want to spend Christmas with my family, hot chocolate and cookies and board games and you." And they tell each other that they like each other, and it's adorable. And then that's it. And it's so cute. It was such a cute
It
book
was
like
cute.
that. I think that's, and
I still wanted them to bang, but it was
yes,
cute.
okay, yes, it would have been nice for them to bang, but it was really cute. So,
Who was your favorite character?
oh my God, there were so many. I loved so many of them. I don't know. I loved Evelyn because she is just like, she is so funny. I loved the dogs, clearly. I liked both the MMs, I liked a lot of the people in here. They were so sweet.
Yeah.
How about you?
You don't even have one that you could choose.
No. This is the like, I hate everybody,
I know, but the opposite.
but the opposite.
I'm gonna go with Libby.
Okay. Yeah, she was cute. Who was your least favorite? I
Least
don't,
favorite, I'm going to go with Frank's mom.
yeah.
He couldn't even be bothered to learn ASL.
Yeah.
She
Honestly, yeah, that's
basically
that's
cut him off from
disappointing.
the family. Like,
Yeah. Boo,
bye,
tomato,
goodbye.
tomato.
Yes.
Alrighty. So, Amazon gives us a 4.5, Goodreads a 4.4, and Storygraph a 4.4.
I rated it 4 stars.
So did I.
Mhm.
I had such a good time. It was so sweet. It probably would have gone up more if there was some banging.
If there's some
But
banging.
the only thing I have with that is I feel like if done the wrong way, the banging would have ruined the story. And I
Yeah,
think like as much as I want it, I think that it was good on its own, even though
right.
like that
Well,
would
we
have
don't
upped
know
it
what it would
more.
have looked like.
That's true.
We don't know.
Yeah. But poorly written smut will like
It probably would
bring
have,
something down.
honestly, it probably would have been poorly written simply because heavy kissing was written in as a trigger warning.
Yeah, so maybe honestly though, but what I will say is like I give it to the author for like knowing their limits as to what they can and cannot
Absolutely.
write. And if they cannot write, boy in
Or they don't
hole.
want to, right? Yeah.
Sorry.
Dude, I saw a TikTok. It was either this morning or last night, and it said, I'm gay, but I would let a woman peg me
I saw that
if she,
too.
yeah. I think I sent
Yeah,
it
it's
to you,
so
but
funny.
yeah.
No, you didn't, but I saw it willingly on my own.
Oh, I did send it, but
And
you
then
might
you
not
sent
have.
it to me. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's what happened. But that was like the other one that you sent me, and I was like, I
Just
saw
like,
this actually. Well, it's funny because I saw it and I liked it, and I saw the little thing that said Ariel reposted, and it was the baby daddy one,
oh yeah,
which I
yeah.
thought was really funny. But no, so like no, this story was so sweet. And honestly, like with all the like shit we've been having, to have like something
Yeah.
actually like nice
End
and
a
sweet
special
was
on a sweet note.
so And to like, this is such a great way to end the year as well. It was like on a sweet note. No peppers because there was no spice. Survivability. Well, I'm not a
It
man,
was a
but I would have fun.
green pepper,
It was a green pepper. Yes, a bell pepper.
bell pepper. Thank you.
That one.
Yes.
I would survive.
I would also survive.
I would have fun in this little town. It's so cute.
Yes.
But I would also not be a dickhole and I would find better ways to communicate with people who can't communicate. So there's
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So that was fun.
Yes. Well,
Yay.
thank you for spending our last special of 2025 with us, and
Yes.
join us for our next adventure into 2026. Make sure to keep reading.
And keep it smutty. It is a voicemail from from a man like sticky. That's not the word. Slimy, disgusting. But so he he says, let me know. Why does that? I don't know. Anyways, so they're gonna make Thanksgiving. I don't know what the sentence says. He hence the copy to Bennett.